So let's talk about the basics of story structure, a guide for new authors. This channel is supposed to be about food and fiction, and like 90% of the time it's about food, or at least the big videos are. My little videos are usually writing prompts for fiction stories. But let's talk about the basics of story structure, a guide for new authors. Because whether you plot or you write by the seat of your pants, you still need to have an understanding of story structure. So, the structure of your story is the framework that holds your narrative together. It gives it shape and flow while guiding readers through the story that you're crafting. A well-structured story captivates readers, maintains their interest, and delivers a satisfying or realistic conclusion as far as the rest of the events go. Remember, the only rule in your story is that the rules you set in your story must be followed. So, for new authors, understanding story structure can feel a lot like learning a new language, but it's a skill worth mastering. This guide will break down the basics of story structure to help you start writing compelling narratives. So, first of all, let's talk about the definition of story structure. What is story structure? Story structure is the organized way in which a story unfolds, ensuring that the events occur in a logical and engaging sequence. While there are many ways to structure a story, most narratives share common elements that provide a beginning, middle, and end. So, let's dive right into the classic three-act structure. So, Act 1 is the setup. It's the opening of your story. It introduces your world, the main character, and the situation that they're in. It sets the stage for the reader and hints at the journey to come. So let's take a look at a setup of a story. And we'll start with just the tiny vampire from outer space that's Bitey 23. So this is a story that I just started, and I'll be working on it more after I finish the horror of the Kazumari statue, Greed statue. But this is book 23. So let's see. Did I actually introduce the story? Because it is book 23. Sometimes as you get into a series, your book will lose the book structure and it will start to take on the structure throughout the whole series. So let's see. Chapter 1, En route to Earth. Marcus rolled onto his side. Shadow was sleeping next to him, but not on him. He sighed. She was mad at him for spending a lot of time on the bridge, and even more time planning their hostile return to Earth. She understood why he had to spend more time on the bridge, and she understood the plan. Parts of it she was even excited about. What she was angry about was his lack of interest in exercising the motto. He was planning a war against the humans. It was a rather all-consuming task that left him very little time to let Shadow enjoy his motto. But Marcus had some time tonight. Mark was on the bridge. So, here's the who, what, when, where, and why of this story. Who? Marcus and Shadow. Why? They're in a, where? They're in a spaceship heading back to Earth. Why? Because Marcus is planning a war against the humans. So, they want more freedom to move around on Earth. They want less hassle, less worry. It's a planet full of living creatures, and that's not working for Marcus or his family, so he's going to change that. That's the conflict. So, let's go back to the opening setup. So, Act 1, the opening of your story introduces the world, the main character, and the situation they're in. So introduce the protagonist. That would be Marcus and Shadow. What do they want? They want to live on Earth in peace and vampire harmony. What's missing in their life? Peace and vampire harmony. And for Shadow, it's Mutto. Mutto is a euphemism. I'll let you guess the meaning of that. So we need to establish the setting. So obviously this is some point in the future. They're on a spaceship heading back to Earth, and it's an advanced spaceship like you would see in Star Wars or Star Trek or some of the space adventure movies that have come out recently. So what is unique in this world? Well, it's vampires against humans. I'm not sure that's unique, but it's vampires against humans with the vampires as the main characters. So what's the inciting incident? A key event occurs that disrupts your character's normal life and sets the story in motion. So this is called a call to adventure. We don't really have that in this particular couple of paragraphs. What we have is an inciting incident about Marcus neglecting his husbandly duties. That's the inciting incident. And since we're talking about basically war against the earth by vampires, we're setting the stage for increasing incidences, which doesn't really fit into the 3-act structure, and I'll show you in a minute what it does fall into. But let's go on to Act 2, the conflict. The middle of the story is where the action unfolds, challenges arise, and the protagonist begins to change. It's the longest section and often the most dynamic, or the one that includes the most character shifts. So in the Act 2, you want to introduce obstacles. The protagonist faces challenges and setbacks that test their resolve and reveal their strengths and weaknesses. So we can only assume that the obstacles in this are going to be actually getting back to Earth, taking control of the space station, the one space station that Earth does have in this time frame, and getting onto Earth and starting the war without much resistance until they're really ready to set off some explosions. And we want to build tension. The stakes get higher as the protagonist edges closer to their goal. Conflicts, both internal and external, intensify. So this stuff, for my story, would occur on the spaceship and possibly as they enter the space station. There's where the tension building would occur. Then you have the climax, or the pinnacle, which I cannot spell pinnacle at all. So this is a pivotal event or realization that shifts the story's direction. It's a moment of transformation or heightened stakes. For the Little Bitey story, book 23, this would probably occur on the space station. So then you have Act 3, the resolution. So this is the final act that delivers the climax, where the conflict reaches its peak, followed by the resolution. So we have the climax, which would be the final battle before the takeover or not of Earth. So it'd be the climax would be the final battle where Marcus either takes over the Earth or the humans win and Marcus is driven back and potentially maybe off of Earth back to Umbra. And then we have a resolution. So this resolution would either be Marcus and his family and all the vampires celebrating their win, or it would be the Earthlings celebrating their win over the vampires. So that's would be the possible resolutions in that story. So have you ever wondered why so many books, so many book series, there are only 3 of them? Yeah, it couldn't possibly be because of the 3-act structure, where book 1 is the setup, book 2 is the conflict, and book 3 is the resolution. All right, so in addition to the 3-act structure, we have the 5-act structure. And I tend to write a little closer to this 5-act structure. I almost have a combination of the 5-act structure and the hero's journey, which I'll cover the hero's journey in a separate article and in a separate video. But the 5-act structure is used in plays mostly, and it expands the 3-act structure. You know, you've got Act 1, the introduction, the who, what, when, where, and why. You've got the Act 2, well, here, I'll just put it in there, who, what, when, where, and why. So Act 2, you've got the rising action. You'll have, you know, little skirmishes or whatever for your rising action, and it will lead up to your climax. And then after the climax, you'll have the falling action where all of your subplots are tied up and your main plot starts to get resolved. Then you'll have the resolution where the subplots are resolved and the main plot finishes getting resolved. Now, if you're going to do a book series, okay, one of these subplots is probably unfinished because you're going to turn it into your main plot for your next book. So, what are some tips for structuring your story? First, you should start with some kind of outline, or my favorite is just a sentence and then a paragraph that expands on that sentence. But you can map out your story beforehand so that you can see the bigger picture, and this can also help you not lose direction. I should do a video on how to create an outline. But next, you want to focus on the cause and effect. Every event in your story should be connected. One action leads to the next, creating a sense of momentum. When I write a story, since I don't use an outline, generally my question usually is, so what happens next? You know, what happens next? Where does this lead? And my stories are character driven, so all the rising action comes from the characters and their reactions to the previous thing that just happened. You also need to keep pacing in mind. If you've got a fast-paced action sequence, slow it down with reflection or something. I tend to slow mine down with food or exercising the mutto in the case of my Little Bitey series. This rhythm of the story keeps readers engaged without overwhelming them. If you'll watch horror movies, you'll usually see a really scary element followed with them running away, and then they get a break, and then there's another scary element that's even worse than the last one, right? So you don't want to essentially scare your readers out of their seats and like they're throwing your book down and never going to pick it up again. Okay, next, develop subplots. These are secondary storylines that add depth to your story and provide opportunities for character development. So if you see a subplot developing in your story, don't get rid of it. Don't say, like, I'm not doing that. I'm only working on my main plot. You need to have subplots to help keep your readers engaged and to give your fiction story depth. And number 5, stay flexible. While structure is essential, don't let it stifle your creativity. Be open to adjusting your outline as your story evolves. So, why does all this matter? Why does story structure matter? Why can't you just sit down and slap out your book and edit it and call it done and publish it? Well, you can. You can exactly do that. You can slap your story down and edit it and publish it, and it'll probably be fine. But having some structure to your story will make your story better. A solid story structure ensures that your narrative feels cohesive and engaging. It helps you organize your ideas, maintain pacing, and guide your readers through an emotional journey. By understanding the basics of structure, you can focus on developing rich characters and themes within a clear and captivating framework. That's what story structure does. And if you don't have any structure, you will have to create that structure in your editing. And sometimes I end up doing this because I don't work with an outline. I'll end up with sections that just do not make any sense. Let me see if I can find one in my Horror of Tazumari. Well, here's a flow problem, and this is what I'm dealing with in the Horror of the Tazumari statue. Not so much a structure problem, but a flow problem that, if I don't correct it, could lead to a structure problem. So here they were in Nelson's office. They just left the new shadow box in the office, and they walked away, and Martha was angry, but he ushered her further down the hall. He couldn't let her bash Nelson's head in, right? So they're pissed off at Nelson, and they want to brain him. Understandable. So here's a little bit of a flow problem. Because we ended here, and this is the end of this scene, it starts with dialogue here. And it's a little bit of a problem because there's no expose up here. There's no... It flows if you read it from here to here. But if someone were to stop reading right here and come back to it in a week, they'd be right here, and this becomes a problem. So, a little bit of a flow problem here. And then we've got, he's on my nerves, Martha said as they walked down the hall. He's on mine too, Joe said, as he kept a hold... See, I've already fixed part of this. As he kept a hold of her hand. What happens is, this means that this was its own sentence, and possibly this wasn't even here. So, it was a gentle grip, but he'd tighten it if she tried to go back to Nelson's office and brain him. And then they passed the elevator. This is actually... that makes no sense. Up here, they passed the elevator. So this is sort of sudden. He's on my nerves. They're talking, and all of a sudden they pass the elevator as they walk down the hall. This needs fixed because it's sudden and you're not expecting it. So you kind of want something like this. So they passed the elevator is incomplete. So we go here and, we clarify that she's going to go back to Nelson's office and brain him if he lets her go. Then, instead of that little sentence, we have Martha turned her head as they passed the elevator. Then she looked at Joe, who was still leading them down the hall. Then we can go into this where they walk into the stairwell, and this no longer makes sense. So sometimes when you don't have an outline, you have a lot of things that you need to fix, and it just kind of keeps going. So this is what I'm dealing with here. Without the outline, I'm fixing a lot of flow problems, which could turn into structure problems. So anyway, let's talk about some final thoughts. Story structure is a tool that can be adjusted. While it provides a roadmap, you don't have to follow it rigidly. Experiment with different structures to see what works best for your story, and with practice and patience, you'll learn to craft narratives that resonate with readers and keep them coming back for more. And eventually you won't even have to structure your story unless you're doing something new. It'll be in your head, automatically where things should fall in your story after you get so many of them done. I've done more than 50 books, long ones, short ones, and you get better at this with time. and you need less prep work as you do more stories. Anyway, that's the end of this discussion today. If you liked this video, please like and subscribe, and I will talk to you later.